Hi, this is Kurt Stockwell with Well Dressed Walrus. We are a local website design and development company here in Spokane. What we do is build beautiful, usable websites for local businesses. A website needs to be beautiful, it needs to be usable for your users, your customers, and yourself. Contact us anytime. We'd love to talk with you about your online marketing.
Spokane listens when business talks. Welcome to Business Talks, the region's only local business talk show with your host, Ryan McNeice. Business Talks is brought to you by our friends at STCU and Well Dressed Walrus. Now, let's get down to business with Business Talks.
Welcome to Business Talks. I'm Ryan McNeice, and we're here in the studio with Andrea Parrish.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Andrea is all things communications, marketing, digital media. We're going to cover a couple things today, but the big issue that we're going to cover is you're a question asker.
Yes.
And you recently had an opportunity to be on TEDx Coeur d'Alene, which I am fascinated with, and really envy the opportunity that you had and appreciate you taking that opportunity and doing it.
Well, thank you.
Also, you are all things social media at STCU and do a great job in that realm as well.
Thank you very, very much. I'm excited to be here.
Well, thank you. And let's talk about how that TEDx opportunity came about. I think most of our listeners understand the magnitude of TED Talks throughout the world. Mm-hmm. You tell us your involvement with TED Talks and TEDx.
So there's kind of two levels of TED. So there's TED, the big organization, the Technology, Entertainment, and Design Conferences. And then there's TEDx events. And TEDx events are the licensed events. So any group or organization or individual can go to TED and say, I want to have a TEDx conference. And they give you this giant list of requirements and this giant list of branding.
Here's how you have to do it if you're going to do it in Coeur d'Alene.
Right, exactly. And then if the organization meets all those requirements, then they get to have a TEDx conference. And those can be handled in any one of a variety of ways. And there's thousands a year across the entire world. I think the number I saw last time I looked was something like 45 TEDx conferences yesterday alone across the world.
No kidding.
So there's lots and lots and lots of them out there. And the TEDx organization in Coeur d'Alene has, I think this was their second or third year, so it's a fairly new TEDx organization. There's also one here in Spokane. They did a TEDx at Fairchild Air Force Base a few years ago. So they're kind of all over the place.
Right.
And every different group or organization gets to handle their speaker requests differently and how they come up with their theme. It's kind of all up to them.
Venue, what's the venue requirement?
I don't know what the requirement is. I do know that depending on the venue and depending on a few other standards is how many tickets you can sell.
Okay.
So I know TEDx Coeur d'Alene could only do 100.
Okay.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but what was the venue?
It was the Kroc Center this year.
It was at the Kroc Center.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's a perfect location
it was
for that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah, that stage is unreal.
Yeah. It was very like you have the spotlight on you, which I like, but I know can be kind of intimidating.
Well, I think that's what I was saying at the top of the show, that's a really impressive stage to have an opportunity to speak. And I think what's, I would say, unique about TED Talks and TEDx is folks that are looking and searching out different genres of TED Talks. They're usually not just browsing in the sense that they're very interested and curious individuals, and which is part and parcel to why you were there, which is you're a question asker and you're curious, which that's what fascinated me when I saw that you had done that. I thought, we need to talk to Andrea and understand, how'd you get there? So how was the request made to you to do that show?
So I actually approached their organization. They didn't approach me. So I just pitched the idea to them. So I went to TEDx and I figured out who to contact, and I said, so I have this project and I have an idea to do a talk around it. I didn't come to them with fully prepared speech or anything. And we had several conversations, the speaker organizer and I, and eventually it came around to, okay, I really want to have you give this talk. Now write it.
No kidding.
Which, that was a bit of a stressful few weeks.
I can only imagine.
I went through 4 different versions of the talk.
And that's just the writing part,
Right.
let alone probably rehearsing it.
I put miles and miles and miles and miles because I walk when I rehearse to try and memorize. And so I was literally just doing laps around our house and around our property.
So we won't ask your neighbors, what is Andrea doing? Oh, she's obviously preparing for a TEDx conference.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah,
No question.
so clear.
She's not a crazy person
No.
walking laps.
Yeah, don't be swayed by her talking to herself in the neighborhood.
Totally normal.
How many hours do you think you have in, whether it be the writing and or the kind of the verbal preparation?
That's a very good question. My first draft of writing took me 14 hours, and I did it all in one day because I just wanted to sit down and get it out. That was after I had spent a very long time kind of talking through the ideas and talking through, and I also kind of go crazy person mildly too, and I write every idea that I have for a speech on a Post-it note, and then those get put up on, well, it started as a wall, but then they all fell off the wall, so I put it on a window. So I had about a quarter of our living room's windows just covered with Post-it notes that I kept rearranging. And then I took all of those, spent about 14 hours that first day writing the first draft.
Consolidating those ideas into some cohesive,
Right.
kind of subtitled, or not subtitled, but table of contents, if you will.
Right. And this is all for a 14-minute speech.
Yeah.
So
Well,
had to cut a lot too. And then probably another 10 to 20 hours getting drafts figured out, rewriting the speech a second time entirely. And then it probably took me, well, I literally practiced every waking moment I was not focused on work for probably about 2 to 3 weeks to get it memorized.
is there a part of the process that you were running by friends or family that, whether during the writing or once you felt like you had at least a finished written product, that you were almost an editorial type?
Yep.
How'd that work?
So I have a group of friends I call my board of directors.
Okay.
And they're the people that I kind of go to and say, here's my idea. What do you think?
Yeah.
And they all got to read all of the drafts. A couple of them I recorded for my podcast. I have a studio anyway. So
Right.
I recorded an audio version of it and sent it out to my mom and my dad
Okay.
and a few other people.
And said, give me some true constructive criticism here.
Right. Which is how I ended up rewriting it completely.
You're like,
Which is helpful.
when I asked you, I actually didn't want that response. Now I got to spend another 14 hours.
Right. But yeah, so I sent it out to kind of friends and family and that group. Rewrote it an entire second time, did the same thing. My husband could probably give the speech as well as I could at this point.
Yeah.
And then I also had 4 kind of mini events where I invited 3 or 4 people who I really trusted, or people that I didn't know really well.
Yeah, which
but
adds a little bit of an element of there's insecurity if you
Yeah.
don't know them, which maybe elevates the game a bit.
Right, exactly. And then I also had a few people from work. I did one at work over lunchtime. And I tried it with the slides and kind of did a dry run and made edits based on those. And then there was a kind of rough draft rehearsal with the TEDx group.
Okay.
Took their criticism and feedback and all of that. Did the final run through the night before.
On
and
the
then,
stage?
Yep, on the
Final-
stage.
okay. So-
With the lights.
So a
with
true
the,
dress rehearsal.
Yep, and then the final event, and I was the first speaker of the day.
Oh my
so-
gosh, and here comes Andrea Parrish. What was your thought when your name was called?
I think when my name was called, it was okay, let's go.
Time to go.
Yeah.
You'd certainly put in the preparation.
Right.
So in terms of content, a question asker.
Yes.
You are innately a question asker, a curious person, whether it be on your own social media feeds, you are asking friends and acquaintances and the general public questions about their day, questions about overall thoughts. Tell us a little bit about that in terms of where do you think that came from? Is that since you were a little kid?
According to my dad, I've been asking questions since a few minutes after I was conceived. So apparently
Early
it's,
then.
yeah, apparently it's always been something that I've done. The official project, for what it's worth, started about 5 years ago, where I asked a very specific question once a day to make sure, just to see what people would say. And that kind of started that element of it.
And see what type of engagement you either did or did not get.
Right. Or even just a lot of people that I've talked to see the questions, interact with them, but they never respond to them and never post anything.
Yeah, they might see it, but
Right.
not actually engage and respond.
Right. But I've always loved questions. I did 8 years of competitive speech and debate. I was always expected to become a lawyer, which I find kind of amusing.
Yeah,
But
well, oftentimes the question is more important than the answer, right?
Right.
So in terms of being a question asker, give us a little bit. I don't mean to go through your speech, if you will, in your presentation, but give us the high points of what you really enjoyed about what you were really trying to convey to the TEDx audience.
oh man. Well, first of all, I'm just nerd out about questions because
Yeah.
I love them. But
That's why you were there. That's why you're the
Exactly.
perfect person.
So the first main point was that not every question is constructed the same, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there is such a thing as a bad question. Because every TED or TEDx talk I could find about questions, it already existed, which I did go watch all of them, including some that were in French that I had to watch the translations for.
Yeah.
That didn't go so well. But all of them talk about let's ask better questions. Let's ask good questions. Let's do this and you can ask a better question. And I just wanted to take a step back from that and say it's not asking a good question, it's just asking a question at all. Because a lot of times people just don't ask a question. Statistics tell us that by the time you are 14 years old, you ask half as many questions as you do when you're 4 years old. Which is just shocking. I mean,
It is.
nobody wants to ask as many questions as a toddler,
Yeah.
but still.
But that is statistically interesting.
Right. And so, kind of looking at how questions are constructed and how they're formed, I had the idea of that there's 3 types. There's an informational question. You can Google an informational question.
Right.
How do I get directions to the studio? That kind of stuff. Then there's rhetorical questions, which are constructed to make a point or constructed to kind of lead the conversation somewhere.
Leading question.
Which really can be very illustrative about the person asking them or their assumptions about the world or the kind of conversations they want to have.
Meaning within the question itself.
Right, exactly. The one I used in my TED Talk was so when are you two going to start a family in the wedding receiving line?
Yeah.
Because you always get that question.
Yeah, that's definitely one that's
Right.
asked.
And it assumes so much. Like it assumes that you're planning on children. It assumes that getting married isn't starting a family.
Yep, relationship status. I mean,
Right.
Many, many things.
So much.
Yeah.
But it's often asked, and it reveals a lot. And then the third type of question is the exploratory question, the kind where you really don't know what the answer is going to be, but that's what makes it so cool. And all 3 of those have a place, and all 3 of those construct conversations in a very different way. And the cool thing is that any of those can start a conversation if both people are willing to treat it like
Yep.
a question.
And depending on what the intent of that conversation is.
Right.
Whether it is a leading question to get to a specific response, or as you said there lastly, that you're actually asking the question because you are sincerely, psychologically interested in where is this going to go and what's the answer going to be.
Exactly.
And who knows where that can be. That's part of the excitement.
Yeah. Or what do I think about it?
Let's take a short little break and
Okay.
come right back and talk about asking questions and what questions mean and the power of questions.
Awesome.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.
I'm Mike Marzetta from Mind's Eye. One of my life's goals is to never grow up, never have to grow up. What could be worse? My wife, Christy, and I had kind of 2 fundamental values that kind of led to Mind's Eye's creation. We wanted to make the difference in lives of kids, and we wanted to have fun doing it. Mind's Eye Robotics is a high-quality, hands-on STEM education experience. We try to give the teacher a nice high-tech set of tools. We teach the teachers how to implement the curriculum in the lab, and 90% of it is them building, programming, formatting, designing, inventing. We want Mind's Eye to be cooler than Xbox. We want the kids to go there and come home from school every day and go, wow, I did the coolest thing today, and not necessarily know that they've learned all this stuff. Kids are very passionate about it. You can see that they're having fun, they're excited, they're energetic, they're in the zone. I hear a lot of it, how do I get my kids to do homework? Well, you make it fun, and they come in before class starts, and they stay late, and they're not thinking the extra credit. They're thinking, I'm having too much fun, and I can't put this dang project down. It's college level stuff that they're learning. Change and learning are synonymous, and if you don't change, you get left behind. You got new companies emerging using new technologies and have a high demand for high skilled labor. They're good paying jobs. It'd be great to just hire some local folk to fill those. I think that we've got that kind of potential here in Spokane. We're graduating some great kids. When STCU supports learning, they're supporting our future. So many other organizations out there are so bottom line profit focused. I think they lose focus on what's important. I see STCU helping the greater community outside of it to get better, to learn, to grow, and to progress. We're here to do good. We're here to help the greater good. We're very proud to be able to partner with STCU to that end. I think what's a better place to help the greater good than with helping kids? I'm Mike Marzetta, and STCU is here for good.
Welcome back to Business Talks. I'm Ryan McNeice, and we're here with Andrea Parrish. Thanks again. And right before we left for the break, we were getting into the construct, if you will, of the 3 areas or types of questions that you were speaking to at the TEDx conference. And you've even brought a certain amount of questions that you utilize. Throw out a couple of them, and just so folks understand, how you construct these inquisitive questions.
So I actually have a database of about 1,300 of these that I've been asking for the last 5 years. And on my podcast, I actually ask a question every day, plus a little bit of the research behind it. So any of these questions, I actually have a podcast about. So for example,
all of these?
Every single one of these. I'm up to about 440 some episodes as of today.
And how long generally are episodes?
2 to 3 minutes.
Okay.
They're very quick.
And actually, while we're on that point, how can people find as much information as they can about you, whether it be the podcast or whether it be seeing the TEDx?
So go to AndreaParrish.com with 2 R's. So Parrish. And you can find pretty much everything there.
Okay.
If you want to subscribe to the podcast, it's called 1,000 Things to Talk About.
And that's on the back of the questions even.
On the back of the questions even.
Okay, perfect. Well, I want people to check this out.
Okay, so for example, question number 208. Do you believe in prophetic dreams?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, don't know if we should go into that, but
oh, well, fair enough. Number 216. What does giving up mean to you? 224. Did you go through a rebellious phase? This is one of my favorites.
Which that one could tell a lot about somebody.
Oh, yeah.
When, why, what.
Oh, my first rebellion was going to the Star Wars Episode 1 and cutting school to do it early. I got in trouble for that one.
Well, what are you going to do for this Star Wars episode coming out now?
Well, I can't exactly cut
school.
class.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question. Yeah. This is one of my favorites. 227. What would you like to experience more of?
And again, I think the reason we both are fascinated with the questions and the psychology behind the questions is a well-written, otherwise you'd think simple question elicits so much of so much of a response. If somebody really sits down and says, let me think about that. Here's what I really think. And you just never know whether you're talking about the rebellious phase. You're going to learn something about that person, their surroundings, etc.
How they think, what's going on in their head, what influences they have, the kind of books and articles and movies that people will quote in response are sometimes some of my most interesting things to look at.
Well, and then the movie itself probably tells something about the person that, why is that your favorite movie? What's the connection to a personality trait or a experience in their life? How do you think asking questions and how those questions are asked has helped you, assisted you, has contributed to your experiences in business? Because you've been involved with Gonzaga University and, of course, Spokane Teachers Credit Union now, and marketing and communications and in the business world. All of those elements in your expertise comes together in that marketing, communications, digital media. How do you think that's played a part in your engagement with either the businesses you've been involved in or your business experience?
That's an excellent question.
Longer than
well, you can't fit that on a card.
We'll put that one on the yellow page.
Yeah, exactly. I think the first thing, because I do focus so much on communications as well as marketing, I think the first way that it has impacted it is I've always thought that the best marketing is really good communications because it's answering a question that somebody may or may not even realize they have.
Right.
So by constantly asking questions and asking questions that may seem really self-evident, you can often uncover the kinds of things that people are actually thinking about and curious about. also especially online, the whole structure of the way digital marketing works is based around answering a question. Because whatever somebody types into a search engine is actually a question. They're not saying library hours. They're saying, what are the library hours? Even if they don't type the what, it's still a question. And so the whole structure of how you be a helpful and informative and useful presence online is in answering those questions sometimes before they're even asked.
Yeah, and anticipating. I was just going to say anticipating what the problem that needs to be resolved or the question being asked.
Right, or figuring out what the assumption is, because sometimes the assumption behind something needs to be challenged. But if you just answer the question asked, then you may not be actually helping.
Right.
My favorite example is when somebody says, for one of our STCU branches, what hours are you open? Well, half the time they're asking, when can I deposit a check?
Right.
And those are two very different sets of answers, because you can deposit a check in about 1,000 different ways.
Right. Might not need to be open.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you don't ask that question, if you just assume that's what they want to know.
They just want to know when the cookies are going to be out, possibly, or the
the
free
cookies.
coffee. Yeah.
Always the cookies.
Yeah, the cookies are good, though.
They're so good.
Yeah.
I go to the branch for cookies.
Well, in terms of communication and that being, as you described, that what are we trying to communicate? I was talking to Lance Kistler this morning and being complimentary that STCU, as well as anybody, if not better than anybody, communicates simply community involvement. And, there's a lot of ads or marketing type placements that you'll look at, and if you have to pause and you honestly don't know what is trying to be communicated at all, I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
I think as a marketing communications individual, you do have to ask yourself, if someone can't, kind of that keep it simple, stupid mentality of, I know what they're trying to communicate. I know what the imagery is that STCU is trying to communicate. And I think STCU is so effective in doing that. Yeah. You see something and you understand right off the bat what they're trying to communicate.
Yeah, and I think that kind of stems from the back end of having a really clear sense of purpose throughout the entire organization. Because trying to take an unclear message and distill it down to something clear is challenging. But when you have a really clear purpose, bottom to top, it makes it so much
That is
easier.
interesting, though, because I think by your statement there, it's trying to maintain or create a cohesiveness from all hierarchies or levels of the organization, that one level might be saying, I think this is what we're trying to communicate, and another saying something different. But as you're indicating, a cohesive message.
Right.
Cohesive
And that starts with the question of saying, what is our one thing? What do we want somebody, without question, in 7 seconds to be able to describe this organization as? Which is a question I love asking. Like, how do you describe the project you're passionate about in 7 seconds or less?
It's great. It's like a version of the elevator speech to a certain extent. Is can you get there that quick? Well, and for me with STCU, I'd say community involvement.
Yep.
And as big of an organization as it is, meaning economically, dollars, et cetera, it connects locally. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
So it's certainly effective.
That's why I love working there.
How about what goes into the linguistics of a question?
Oh, man.
Because I think what I'm trying to say is you might have 3 or 4 questions that appear to look the same. But if you change up the linguistics of some of the phrasing, et cetera, how much of a difference does that make?
Huge. Absolutely gigantic. In trying to come up with an exact example, of course, I know I have like 50 in my database, but one of the things that is really awesome and really frustrating about language is the connotative denotative separation. That something with a very clear connotative or denotative meaning, so what's in the dictionary, what linguistically is its base and its root and all that kind of stuff, has one meaning, but what ends up being used as a meaning linguistically, totally separate.
No, I agree with you. This comes up legally all the time because of how it's put into a particular paragraph, phrase, et cetera. Is it before or after the semicolon? Does it change what the Webster's dictionary meaning might be of that word? And the answer is all the time.
Oh, constantly. And that whole pulling on emotion, playing on emotion. I still remember getting a very thoughtful, very well-written letter or message, Facebook message from one of my friends when one of the questions I asked was pound or purebred. And she wrote me probably about 500 words about how pound is an old phrase that evokes all of these terrible emotions that isn't what most animal shelters are. And I would have never even thought about that.
Yep.
But the language
word
and the
pound.
construction.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying, though. And it can, evoke a lot of psychology.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was your favorite part about having the opportunity to be on stage for TEDx? And will you do it again?
Public speaking is my drug. It's
Really?
my drug of choice.
That's, we could keep going on that because I'd say 99% of the people you would ask these questions of would say, no, thank you.
Yep. No, I'm the youngest of 3 kids, and you could pull whatever
Gotta get your
meaning
word
you
in
want
edgewise.
from that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But also, I did 8 years of competitive speech and debate. I did it all through high school, and then it's part of how I paid for college.
It's in your blood.
Completely. My mom was a debater, and we got raised as debaters. And it wasn't, you shouldn't ground me. It was, here's my 14-point outline of why grounding me is ethically unsupportable.
And probably not the right way to punish me here.
Right.
Thanksgiving conversations around the table, I can literally only imagine.
Oh, they're fun. But that's kind of the environment I grew up in. And combine that with something that I am completely and utterly personally passionate about. I loved it.
It just really, I think a comment I make a lot on this show is sincerity. It shows the sincerity and passion about what you love to do. And I mean, you emote that. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
That's what I'm so excited about when you have an opportunity to talk to folks in different business settings is, are they excited? Are they passionate about what they do? Another way to say it is this something that they have to do? And you know what I mean when I say that. Because there's things like, I'll get along by this job, this endeavor. But there are people that you talk to, like yourself, I have to do this to survive. This is what makes you tick. That's exciting.
It's just, so will I do it again? I hope so. It may or may not be another TEDx. I would love to find opportunities to give more speeches, to do more public speaking. And I'm kind of actively poking around, seeing what those opportunities might be. But yeah, of course I want to do it again because like I said, it's my drug of choice.
Well,
adrenaline rush.
I think it's clear that someone that has the passion that you do and the background and expertise in this, you're going to be doing a lot of it. Will you please come back and talk more about this? Unfortunately, we're coming to the end, but Andrea, thank you so much for being here. Please go check out, whether it be on LinkedIn or, again, let's follow up with the website where people can see the TEDx.
So it's Andrea Parrish, AndreaParrish @.com. And then Muse Topics, MuseTopics, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram is where you can find the questions every single day.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Business Talks is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. Business Talks is brought to you by our friends at STCU and Well Dressed Walrus. Business Talks wishes you good business and a good day.
Hi, this is Kurt Stockwell with Well Dressed Walrus. We are a local website design and development company here in Spokane. What we do is build beautiful, usable websites for local businesses. A website needs to be beautiful, it needs to be usable for your users, your customers, and yourself. Contact us anytime. We'd love to talk with you about your online marketing.
The economy is getting stronger. Banks are lending again, and interest rates are at historic lows. Now is a great time to buy your dream home. The caring and knowledgeable professionals at Homes for You have been helping people just like you for over 20 years. They take the time to listen to what you want and will help you find just the right home in Washington or Idaho. Real estate is what we do at Homes for You, 928-5782, or visit online at homes4uspokane.com.